Audio Jungle.
Podcast, where we explore the stories that shape our world. Today's episode is titled, The Fall of a Dreamliner, What Went Wrong? The Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a name that once echoed innovation, comfort, and a new era of air travel. But behind the sleek design and fuel efficiency, a tragic chapter was written, one that left families broken and a nation in mourning. Airplane departure. Let us take you back to that fateful flight, an Air India Dreamliner journey that never reached its destination. A moment that changed many lives forever. What led to this catastrophe? Was it mechanical failure, human error, or a series of unfortunate events? Studio microphone. Today, we unfold the timeline step by step. We analyze the decisions made before takeoff, the mid-air signals, the distress calls, and the heartbreaking final moments. Expert insights and investigation reports help us piece together what went wrong. This isn't just about an aircraft crash, it's about lives lost, lessons ignored, and the painful price of progress. Revolving light, we remember the brave crew, the innocent passengers, and the emergency teams who responded in the face of chaos. Their stories deserve to be heard. Open book, and through this story, we also ask a deeper question. What can the world of aviation learn from this fall? Studio microphone. Stay with us as we explore the rise and fall of a flying marvel, and the need for safer skies. Headphone, brief music transition, coming up, a timeline of the incident. Causes behind the crash, the aircraft's technical background, voices from survivors and families. What has changed since then? This is the Caleb journey. Let the truth take flight.
Imagine this, June 12th, 2025. You're on Air India flight AI-171, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Ready to go Ahmedabad to London. It's a bit delayed, sure, but you're finally taking off. Then, just seconds, literally seconds after the wheels leave the ground, something's wrong. That powerful engine roar just fades, the plane isn't climbing. Then you hear the radio call crackle through to air traffic control. Thrust not achieved. Falling, and then silence. An impact. A terrible tragedy. Today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that crash. Air India flight AI-171, our mission. To really piece together what happened, we're looking at everything: flight data, the black boxes, eyewitness videos, expert analysis. We want to understand how this could happen. A modern jet falling from the sky moments after takeoff.
Yeah, and it's not just what happened, but digging into the why. Why does it matter? We'll be looking at all the layers of evidence, connecting the dots, trying to find the precise reasons. It's about understanding the systems involved and, well, what it means for air safety for all of us, really.
Okay, let's set the scene. Flight AI-171, that Boeing 787 Dreamliner, Ahmedabad to London, June 12th, 2025. Scheduled for 1:10 p.m., but it got delayed. Took off at 1:48 p.m. instead. And this wasn't its first flight that day either. It had already flown Paris to Delhi, then Delhi to Ahmedabad, a busy aircraft. And, something that's really unsettling? There were signs even before takeoff. A passenger, Akash Vatsa, he recorded a video. It showed weird things like the wing flaps were constantly moving up and down on the ground, the AC wasn't working right, the entertainment system, totally dead.
Those are definitely things you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
Minor, maybe, but still.
Yeah.
Flags. On a Dreamliner especially. And speaking of pre-flight, the refueling, that took 42 minutes?
Which is longer than usual, right? Like 35 minutes?
Yeah, a bit longer. But a DGSEA official, that's India's Aviation Authority, they said for a flight with maximum payload, it wasn't necessarily abnormal.
Yeah.
So maybe not a smoking gun there, but noted.
Okay. Who was on board? 242 people total. That's 230 passengers, 10 crew members. And the pilots, two very experienced ones. Captain Sumit Sabharwal, 8,200 flying hours. Co-pilot Clive Kundar, even more, 10,100 hours. These guys knew what they were doing.
Absolutely. Decades of experience between them.
The plane finished its checks, got clearance at 1:34 p.m. from runway 23. Weather, all good, clear skies. Official takeoff time, 1:48 and 44 seconds p.m.
And then, almost immediately, things went wrong.
Terribly.
The plane reached just 625 feet, and it couldn't get any higher. Just stuck there. That's when the pilots made that final call. So chilling. Thrust not achieved. Falling.
Yeah.
Then radio silence. contact lost.
And the crash itself, just 34 seconds after takeoff, it hit a hostile BJ Medical College in Magnani Nagar, about 1.5 kilometers from the airport. A huge fire broke out instantly. And the timing?
Yep.
Lunchtime, the hostel canteen was apparently full, maybe 35 students inside, just off.
Truly devastating, the scale of it.
But amidst all that, there was one survivor. Incredible story. Vishwas Kumaramesh, a British citizen. He was in seat 11A near an emergency exit. Apparently, the way that side of the plane hit the ground, it created an opening. He just managed to get out through the exit. The only one.
Just incredible luck, or perhaps fate, in the midst of such horror. So the investigation kicks off immediately. Priority 1. Find the black boxes. That's the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR, and the flight data recorder, the FDR. They hold the keys, usually. India's AAIB, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, they're leading it. But they've got help from the UK and the US teams too. The actual analysis of that black box data, that's being done in India.
Right. But besides the black boxes, there was other evidence that surfaced pretty quickly. Videos, 2 main ones. One from airport CCTV, okay, quality, which is the takeoff and crash, but the other one, much clearer. Taken by a 17-year-old kid, Aryan. From his home nearby, he was just filming planes taking off to show his friends, and he caught AI-171.
And that video turned out to be incredibly important. Really sharp footage.
It showed 2 things, right? 2 really unexpected things for takeoff. First, the landing gear. It was still down. Shouldn't it be retracted almost immediately?
Standard procedure, yes. Gear up right after liftoff to reduce drag.
And second, maybe even stranger, the wing flaps. They were retracted, pulled in. But for takeoff, you need flaps deployed, don't you? For lift.
Absolutely. Flaps increase the wing's surface area and curvature, generating the lift needed at lower speed for takeoff.
Yeah.
Having them retracted, that's fundamentally wrong.
So could that be it? Pilot error. Forgetting the flaps and gear.
Well, that's the immediate question, isn't it? But with pilots, this experience, it seems highly unlikely. Plus, the Dreamliner, like most modern jets, has sophisticated warning systems. If the flaps aren't set correctly for takeoff, you get loud alarms, visual warnings. It's hard to miss.
Okay.
And there's another point. An aviation expert, Captain Sohail Handa, he mentioned that even without flaps, a Dreamliner should theoretically be able to climb past 600 feet. One engine alone has enough thrust for that initial climb phase.
So the flaps being retracted is weird, the gear being down is weird, but maybe not the sole cause of stalling at 600 feet.
It points towards something bigger, something systemic that happened very, very quickly. Not just a simple configuration error. It leans away from pilot error as the primary cause.
Okay, so if it wasn't pilot error and the plane should climb even with retracted flaps, what else? What brought it down so fast? The evidence seems to be pointing towards a total power loss, right? And maybe this thing called the RA.
Exactly, the RA ram air turbine. That's become a huge focus.
Explain that for us. What is a RA?
Okay, so the RA is basically a small wind turbine, kind of like a propeller, that's normally stowed away inside the aircraft's body or wing. It's an emergency device. If the plane loses all its main electrical power sources, the engine generators, the APU, the RA, automatically deploys into the airstream. The wind spins the turbine, and it generates a limited amount of electrical and sometimes hydraulic power, just enough to keep the most critical flight controls and instruments working. It's a last resort.
A last resort. And there's evidence it deployed on AI-171.
There seems to be, yes. Several pieces pointing that way. First, Aryan's video. When you look closely, analysts say you can actually see the RA deployed, extended from the fuselage.
Wow, okay.
Second, the survivor, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He reported hearing a loud bang just before the crash, and the lights flickered. Aviation experts like Captain Steve Shibner on YouTube, they suggest that bang could easily have been the sound of the RA's hatch door popping open as it deployed, and the flickering lights. Classic sign of the RA kicking in and drawing on emergency power.
Okay, that sounds compelling. Anything else?
One more thing. If you listen really carefully to the audio on Aryan's video, there's this faint, high-pitched, propeller-like whining sound. It's distinct from the normal jet engine sound of a Dreamliner. And it's very consistent with the sound a R8 makes when it's spinning in the airflow.
So, video evidence, survivor testimony, audio evidence, all pointing to the RIT deploying.
It seems very likely, yes. An RIT deployment basically screams one thing: total loss of normal power generation.
But it didn't save the plane, why not?
That's the tragic part. The RIT needs airspeed and altitude to be effective. At only 625 feet and relatively low speed just after takeoff, it simply couldn't generate enough power to make a real difference. The plane was too low, too slow.
And the pilots had almost no time.
Precisely. Less than 30 seconds between that falling call and the impact. There was nothing they could realistically do at that point, even with the RAT deployed.
So the RAT confirms the power loss, but the circumstances made it ineffective.
Exactly. It tells us what the immediate problem was, a catastrophic power failure. But it doesn't tell us why the power failed.
Right. Which brings us to the big question. Why did a state-of-the-art Dreamliner lose all power right after takeoff? What are the theories?
Investigators are looking hard at three main possibilities.
Okay, what's number one?
First theory, fuel contamination. This one gained traction pretty quickly. Experts like S.J. Muralidhar, formerly of India's National Aerospace Labs, and Neil Hansford, an aviation consultant, they both pointed to this. The idea is that contaminated fuel, maybe with water, dirt, microbes, or even other chemicals, could have clogged the fuel lines or filters.
Leading to fuel starvation for the engine.
Exactly. It could cause low thrust, like the pilots reported, or even a complete shutdown of both engines, a dual engine failure.
What kind of contaminants are we talking about?
Could be water condensation, simple dirt or sediment from storage tanks.
Yeah.
Microbial growth bacteria or fungus can actually grow in jet fuel if there's water present. Or even something like accidental mixing with diesel exhaust fluid, DEF, which is used in ground support vehicles. If that gets into jet fuel, it can form crystals and block everything up.
Has this happened before? Fuel contamination causing engine issues on a Dreamliner?
Yes, actually. In 2019, a 787 in Japan had a dual engine malfunction linked to fuel contamination. Luckily, in that case, they managed to land safely.
Okay, so if it was contaminated fuel, who's potentially responsible?
Well, the focus would likely fall on the fuel suppliers at Ahmedabad Airport. Companies like Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, Reliance. It would raise serious questions about their fuel storage, handling, and testing procedures. Was the aviation fuel tested properly before being pumped into AI-171?
Okay, that's theory one. Bad fuel. What's the second possibility?
Theory 2 is a total electrical failure. Not the engines themselves initially failing, but the systems controlling them. A senior pilot suggested this possibility. The idea revolves around the variable frequency starter generators, the VFSGs.
Those are like the alternators on the engines, right? Generating the plane's electricity.
Basically, yes. They're integrated starter generators. If they failed, the plane loses its primary source of electrical power. And crucially, that could knock out the electronic engine controls the EECs.
The engine's brains.
Exactly. The EECs manage everything about the engine's performance, including thrust. If the ECs lose power or their connection to the controls, the pilots lose the ability to command thrust from the engines.
So the engines might still be spinning, but the pilots can't control them, can't tell them to produce more power.
That's the idea. It would fit with the thrust not achieved call. They're commanding thrust, but nothing's happening because the EECs are offline.
But don't planes have backup power, like an APU?
They do. The auxiliary power unit.
Yeah.
But the APU usually takes time to start up and come online, maybe up to 90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Not even close. They had less than 30. So a sudden VFSG failure cutting off the EECs. It's a plausible scenario for rapid loss of thrust control.
And there's history here too with Dreamliner electrical systems, isn't there?
Oh, yes. The big one was in 2013. Remember the lithium-ion battery problems? Two Japanese airlines 787s had serious battery incidents. Smoke, overheating, melted parts. It was traced back to manufacturing defects in the batteries.
And that led to the entire global fleet of Dreamliners being grounded for months.
It did. It showed just how critical these electrical systems are and how vulnerable they could be if something goes wrong, especially with novel technology like those batteries.
Okay, so fuel contamination, electrical failure. What's the third main theory?
The third theory is a straightforward dual engine failure. Both engines just quitting.
Which is incredibly rare, you said.
Extremely rare. Only about 7 documented cases in the last 70 years of jet aviation where both engines failed for reasons other than fuel exhaustion or contamination.
But the evidence fits, potentially. The thrust not achieved call, obviously. And the landing gear.
Yeah, the fact the landing gear wasn't retracted could suggest there simply wasn't enough power, either electrical or hydraulic, depending on the system, to even perform that function right after takeoff. It points to a very sudden, very deep power loss affecting multiple systems.
So if it was dual engine failure, what could cause that, if not fuel?
Well, then you're looking primarily at two things again. Either a mechanical failure within the engines themselves, possibly due to a manufacturing defect, or maintenance issues.
Let's take manufacturing first. Boeing. Any history of engine issues with the Dreamliner specifically?
There have been some. Norwegian Airlines, back in 2020, had ongoing issues with the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 engines on their 787s. They complained publicly about persistent problems, engine replacements, flight disruptions, even grounding planes. They ended up in a legal dispute with Boeing and Rolls-Royce over it.
So engine reliability has been a question mark before.
It has. And it's critical to remember AI-171 is the very first fatal crash involving a Boeing 787 Dreamliner since it entered service. Despite other incidents, this is the first hull loss with fatalities.
So if a manufacturing defect in the engines or maybe some other core system is found to be the root cause, the responsibility lands squarely on Boeing.
Yes, that would be the implication.
Okay, what about the other possibility for dual engine failure? Maintenance.
This brings Air India's maintenance practices into focus. Specifically, Air India Engineering Services Limited, or AIESL. It's a separate government-owned company now, spun off from Air India, that handles heavy maintenance for Air India's fleet, including their 787s.
And does this specific aircraft have any maintenance history worth noting?
It does, unfortunately. Public records show a few things. In November 2021, it had a fuel leak and had to make an emergency landing in Turkey. There were also reports of windshield cracks at some point. And significantly, it had experienced battery overheating issues previously.
The same battery issue that grounded the fleet in 2013.
Apparently so, yes. Which raises questions about whether the fixes applied back then were completely effective or if maintenance checks were adequate.
And then there were those issues Akash Vatsa reported right before the flight. The AC, the entertainment system.
Exactly. Well, maybe not directly causal. Those things happening just before the flight could hint at underlying electrical gremlins or systemic issues that maybe weren't caught or properly addressed during maintenance.
When was its last major check?
The records indicate its last comprehensive heavy maintenance check, like a C check, was 2 years prior, in June 2023. Now, planes have regular line maintenance, but a 2-year gap since the last really deep inspection. That's something investigators will be scrutinizing very closely. Was something missed? Did something degrade significantly in that time?
Okay, so 3 major theories. Contaminated fuel, total electrical failure, or dual engine failure due to either a manufacturing defect or maintenance lapse. Lots for investigators to dig into.
A huge amount. And likely, the final answer might involve elements from more than one of these. Crashes are often a chain reaction, right?
Yeah, the Swiss cheese model. Multiple holes lining up. Let's zoom out a bit now. Connect this specific tragedy to the bigger picture, because this isn't just about one flight, is it? It raises broader concerns.
Absolutely. Whenever something like this happens with a modern aircraft, you have to look at the whole ecosystem. And yes, both Boeing's manufacturing and Air India's operations are under scrutiny.
Let's start with Boeing. There have been wider concerns raised about their manufacturing quality recently, haven't there? Beyond just the 787 engines.
Yes, quite a few. An Al Jazeera investigation, for instance, raised questions about the initial FAA certification of the Dreamliner, suggesting maybe some features, like those lithium-ion batteries, weren't tested as rigorously as they perhaps should have been. And then you have whistleblowers, current and former Boeing employees making some pretty serious claims.
Like what?
Things like negligence in the factory, parts not being joined together properly on the 787 assembly line. That was engineer Sam Salapour's specific complaint to the FAA, warning about risks of the plane breaking apart. Other technician, Joseph Clayton, reported finding metal shavings, debris left inside new planes near critical wiring. He said he wouldn't fly on one himself. There are reports of immense pressure on workers not to report defects to keep the production line moving.
That sounds alarming.
It is. And remember John Barnett, the quality manager who worked at Boeing for decades. He tragically died earlier this year, but before that, he had voiced serious concerns. He predicted, chillingly, that the results of what he saw as declining manufacturing standards might take 10 or 12 years to show up in a major incident or crash.
And AI-171, how old was that aircraft?
11 years old. Delivered in January 2014, right in that time frame Barnett mentioned.
Wow. And there was something else about specific planes delivered around that time to certain airlines.
Yes, another quality manager, Cynthia Kitchens. She alleged that between 2012 and 2013, about 11 Dreamliners with known quality issues were delivered. And she claimed that 6 of those 11 went specifically to Air India. She even alleged her boss told her those problematic planes would only go overseas to developing countries.
That's a very serious allegation, implying different standards allegations based on the customer.
A very serious allegation indeed. And while the crash plane, AI-171, was delivered just after that period in early 2014, it still falls within that era of heightened concern about quality control practices at Boeing's 787 plant.
And of course, this isn't Boeing's first major safety crisis in recent memory.
No, absolutely not. We have to remember the two 737 MAX crashes. Lion Air in 2018, Ethiopian Airlines in 2019. 346 people killed. That was traced to the MCAS flight control system and issues with its design, certification, and pilot training. It led to a massive $1.1 billion settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice. So there's certainly a documented history there that raises questions about whether safety culture might have been compromised in favor of production speed or profits at certain times.
Okay, so major questions for Boeing, but what about Air India? Because as you said, other airlines fly Dreamliners without these kinds of catastrophic outcomes.
That's a crucial point. You can't just point the finger at the manufacturer. The operator plays a vital role in safety. And Air India, particularly since its privatization and takeover by the Tata Group, has faced its own set of operational challenges.
Like what specifically?
Well, there have been ongoing reports about pilot fatigue and rostering issues. That led to a mass sick-out protest by hundreds of cabin crew in May 2024, causing major flight cancellations. Then there was a DGCA investigation back in July 2023. The regulator found Air India had allegedly submitted fake safety audit reports concerning 13 specific safety points. That's a serious breach of trust.
Fake reports, wow.
Yeah. And even more recently, just days before the Ahmedabad crash, actually, there was that suspected food poisoning incident on an Air India flight from London.
Yeah.
Several passengers and crew got sick mid-flight.
So while maybe not directly linked to the crash cause itself, these things paint a picture of potential systemic issues. Challenges in operations, maintenance oversight, maybe even safety culture within the airline.
It suggests that, yes, it adds another layer to the investigation.
Yeah.
Was there anything in Air India's own procedures, training, maintenance protocols, or operational pressures that might have contributed, even indirectly, to this chain of events?
So many layers.
Absolutely. As we've really unpacked today, plane crashes are almost never down to one single thing going wrong. It's usually a sequence, a cascade. Multiple failures across different systems, maybe involving design, manufacturing, maintenance, operations. All those holes in the Swiss cheese lining up just perfectly, tragically. Every system is designed with backups, often multiple backups. For a crash like this to happen, especially so soon after takeoff, it implies multiple safety nets failed.
So what happens next in the investigation?
We should expect a preliminary report fairly soon. International standards usually call for one within about 30 days of the accident. So around July 12th, we might get the initial findings from the AAIB. It won't be the final word, but it should give the clear indication of the primary focus areas.
Okay, we'll be watching for that.
And as we wait for those official findings, perhaps the question to reflect on is this. What does this deep dive into the AI-171 tragedy really tell us about responsibility in aviation safety? It's clearly not just one entity. It's a complex web manufacturers, regulators, airlines, maintenance providers, even fuel suppliers. How do all these layers interact? And how can we, just as people who fly or rely on these systems, better grasp these complexities that ultimately shape our safety and our world?